lots of these studies come out, and sometimes one of honestly, my favorite little hobbies is to examine all these news studies that come out in the news each day. And there's a lot we can learn about how we think, how to live. We can get smarter from these studies, yes we can. But which ones should we pay attention to, and which ones are junk science? April Braswell here to discuss. April, good to have you back in my studio.
Thank you.
First, I want to get to this Facebook study, because when I heard about this the first time, I laughed so hard. I'm like, no kidding.
Yeah, really.
If you put sad stories in someone's feed, they'll get sad, and if you put more happy stories in their feed, they'll get happier.
It's basic psychology.
How basic could it be?
Isn't that like week one of all the psychology classes in terms of, everything we know about depression? And I don't mean even like major clinical depression, but just, you're kind of sad, you're kind of feeling borderline on these things. It's like, wow, maybe focus on the cheerful messages, go read Proverbs, go read something uplifting, as opposed to
sitting there
continually,
on social media,
watching the
things.
Depressing stories. There are certain ones I block
have noticed
some.
though, like if the word prayer is in someone's post, it's going to pop up in my news. We no longer control our news feeds on Facebook. And that is super annoying to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I like to control. I want to see what every one of all my friends, it shouldn't matter to Facebook how many I have, they don't get to pick.
Yes.
Well, actually they do.
They do now.
They actually do. But yeah, they didn't used to pick, and I liked it better that way because I could sift through the information and develop new friendships that maybe I didn't know that person so well, but I really like what they posted today. Or, pray for somebody that I don't really know that well, but I'd still like to pray for their child.
You
or whatever.
see it.
But I've noticed that anytime anyone asks for prayer, my whole newsfeed is like, who needs prayer? I guess that Facebook's decided that I'm a
You're the
prayer
prayer
warrior.
queen. Yes, absolutely.
That's awesome. But this was for the purpose of deciding what sorts of stories are contagions, they said. They want to be able, it almost looks to me like, to manipulate information to see if we'll take the bait almost.
Yeah. Part of what I saw, they did comment that the study that they did, it was random people over a period of time, I think it was January 2012. And what they said really was the contagion was, you couldn't quite decide that with this study, but that we're really applying it sufficiently to enough of the Facebook users, of where if this starts to really occur all across Facebook, that kind of a social network where so many people are on it every single day throughout the day really can have a significant impact. And really in terms of being able to manipulate mood, the national mood, as well as the media effect. Because when we watch media, we're watching the news at 6 o'clock, we're watching it at certain times during the day. That's very different than this is now being thrown out to, 1.9 billion people across not the United States, but across other countries as well, to impact them like that.
Yeah.
And it's both a subtle influence, but it was something that was quite distinct. And that to me is the most troublesome, because it's in the contract with Facebook that they're allowed to do certain research. At the same time, there's research that has been decided is overtly manipulative, and that's unethical.
Because you have to consent to manipulative research. And I guess you're doing that when you signed your Facebook agreement. I still say, though, just because I know there are people out there saying, I knew Facebook was bad, I'm closing my account today, I'm getting off Twitter. No, you don't have that luxury right now. We are in crisis times, and we need our social media communication. And by the way, the TSA has it all on you anyway. And what they don't have, the IRS has. And what they don't have, the NSA has. So stay on social media. It's the battleground these days. All right, there was also a new study saying that playing terrorist games, playing these violent video games, can actually increase moral sensitivity? Come on.
It was kind of ridiculous, because the way that they described it was really the very violent games. There have been a number of studies being done on violent gaming again, which I appreciate that they're doing. However, I found that their findings, I wanted to see more of what the study really entailed versus the articles on it, where they sort of did a massive whitewash of it. I'm like, tell me the real numbers, because I want to see how significant this really was. And they're saying that, like the average person playing some kind of sort of like a terrorist game, that, wow, really, they feel guilty afterwards. And there's also the whole evening things out of reciprocity and fairness, that they felt bad about that afterwards. And I'm thinking, an average person, that sounds normal. However, they're almost trying to say that someone who's a real terrorist playing this, though, well, it'll enhance their sensitivity. And I'm thinking they're already not an average psychological makeup to begin with. Hoping that someone who is truly a terrorist or some kind of a psychopath is really actually going to be influenced positively by gaming, I don't think is realistic.
Right, because it depends on what your moral underpinning is. But we can't talk about morality anymore in this country.
I know.
So they're trying to come up with everything they can to keep from discussing what is really at hand here, and that is a spiritual deficit, a cultural deficit, and a moral deficit in our country. Another study said that gamers are more educated and more social than the people who make fun of them. I don't know. I'm pretty social. I have way too many degrees, and I make fun of gamers all the time. In fact, I don't even let my kids play them. I don't, and all their friends play them, and I'm the evil mom of the neighborhood who doesn't let her children play video games. I'm a horrible mother.
So when we think in terms of when video games really sort of originally came out sort of in late 70s, early 80s, of really like, ding, 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 those sort of games, the people who
like
are
pinball doesn't count, though.
Yeah,
April.
I know. But that's where you're like, there's more physicality involved with those. I played a few of those, but years ago. But it was one where the early computer games in sort of like gaming for the first 20 years or so, it really was folks where they were in the basement, they were hanging out, doing gaming alone or connecting with people eventually online across the world, across the country, across the block. Because we now have, everyone has things on their mobile devices or on their smartphone, even like not even that smart a phone often has some of the most basic games on them. More people are playing them. So that is why it's actually an accurate finding that more of sort of the new generation and the new population who's gaming or plays some kind of game is actually well educated, had at least, better relationships. I know, I just like have it so much from sort of like, the nerd, basements, me with the monitor and playing their games alone.
This is as much as I'm going to get, and I hope my kids aren't watching today, which they do a lot for part of their civics course. But I do want to say this, that I have noticed this. I still don't like my son to play it. And in fact, his account that he had on my iPad, because I've only ever let him play it on my iPad, his account was hacked. And hundreds and hundreds of dollars came out of our account rather, because we let him play this one game and somebody hacked it and whatever.
Yes.
But anyway, so we took it away from him.
Those are real dangers.
Those are real dangers. So we took it away from him. But I will say this, that when he goes to like parties with his friends, they're all playing these games together. There is something social about it. And I do play Words with Friends. There's my confession.
There we go. And I know a lot of women like, the Bejeweled and sort of those fun games or clothing or accessory games, and wiping it out completely. I mean, you're a parent, you decide for your kids, I think is totally appropriate. But thinking that all gaming is terrorist games is incorrect. It's really an accurate vision of gaming. There really are quite a number of games out there that might be acceptable. So it's important for parents to look and choose themselves for their kids.
More and more, I'm meeting people, especially second time around, people who've been divorced early, and they're meeting online. According to a new study, the reasons a woman may cheat on her man. This study is interesting because this has some things in it that I definitely hear from my girlfriends when they're complaining. And not that I sit around with my girlfriends and listen to them complain about their husbands, but when that does happen,
it happens.
These are the topics. Tell us about this.
So they're very important. The 3 items were that made women the most vulnerable to being interested in cheating on their marriage were where they felt that they weren't getting enough quality time, they weren't being given enough that loving attention by their spouse, and where the conflicts, really unresolved conflicts. And I want to touch on that one first because it's a brief article. I would be interested in like a fuller description of the study because it's John Gottman has actually studied this more for 20 plus years with married couples. What works, what doesn't, the long-term happy couples is something like 69% of our disagreements never really quite get resolved. However, so I'm going to like sort of jump and correlate and imagine that what really matters is where she felt heard and listened to, and where the things that really matter, and often it's the daily life things which matter more than how big a Valentine's Day present did you give me.
I'll give you one. My husband doesn't like my choice in music, and every time I get in the car, I'm listening to his horrendous 70s, 80s junk he likes this horrible music. I just don't like it. I myself, I like contemporary music.
Right.
And I don't mind jazz and some of those things. But when I get in the car and that music, it just grates on me. And it puts me immediately in a bad mood. And it's what you're saying. It's that unresolved conflict. Now, you wouldn't think music would be a big deal. But to me, my music is huge to me.
Right.
It's what I do when I am in my most intimate moments. My music is really a piece of who I am.
Yes.
And to hear me, you have to appreciate my music, period. And so this is something that I don't think that a lot of men get. I'm not talking about music, but I'm talking about that unresolved conflict that goes over periods of time. I'm not going to divorce my husband over it. I'm used to it.
Of course not.
And eventually he's going to realize what the real good music is
Really,
anyway.
thank you. I think so much of it has to do with where we at least come to understand and appreciate. I don't care for it. It's not my taste, honey. I can see how you really enjoy it. The 2 quick points then for married men is aim to give really good quality time to your wife on a weekly basis and give her some special attention, and it really helps to inoculate against cheating.